Welcome, everyone. My name is Carolyn Rice, and I'm the president of Dayton Council on World Affairs, and we're thrilled to have you here today. Our mission, for those of you who don't know, is to really inform all of us about the many topics out in the world. And today we're going to be talking about Afghanistan and Pakistan. So thank you for joining us. We're recording this so it can appear on other venues and more people can see it than are able to be with us today. I have a lot of thank yous to extend. First of all, I do want to thank Sinclair for allowing us to meet here today, and Bob Keener had a great role in that, so thank you, Bob. I also want to thank Wright State University's University Center for International Education. We began a partnership about 6 months ago, and we're off to a great start. And without them, Michelle and Joy, come on in, none of this would happen. And so let's give them a round of applause. I would also like to thank all the board members who are here today. Jake Dorn, who's here, raise your hand, Jake. I know Mark Meister's here. Mark's back there. Stephen Foster, who is the Vice President of International Affairs, and is part of the reason we made the partnership between Dcowa and Wright State University. Am I missing Donna Schlagheck, who's going to be our moderator? Am I missing anyone else? And myself, of course. So anyways, thank you to all of our board members for being here. Tom Pearson is not here today. I believe he's skiing in Switzerland, but he actually has generously donated. He is sponsoring the videotaping today. So thank you to Tom Pearson for making that possible so that we can see it on our website as well as hopefully on some cable channels in the future. A few items I wanted to remind you, if you haven't gotten one of these parking tickets. If you don't have one, it's $10 when you leave. If you can buy it before, it's at $2, so it's a good savings. So make sure you have that. Also want to make sure that you have one of our brochures that has our website information. If you're not a member, we would be thrilled to have you join us. And also sign up for the email so you can hear about other events. And finally, if you would be so kind as to fill out a survey so that we can be sure that future programs are what you're really looking for. So if you have some topics, then just let us know how we did today. So thank you for that. With that, I'm going to get off because we're going to end precisely at 6:30. So what you really want to hear is our speaker. So I'm going to turn it over to Donna Schlagheck, who will be our moderator.
Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you all for joining us tonight. And again, a special thanks to Bob Keener and Sinclair Community College for hosting us. I will introduce our distinguished panel in the order in which they will be speaking. They have promised to try to be fairly brief in their remarks because, like myself, they all look forward to your questions. It's a very important point in the new operation that the United States has commenced along with its NATO allies in Afghanistan. And we hope today to provide you with a panel that will allow you to both deepen your understanding of what is actually about to unfold and hopefully prepare you to ask very good questions of your lawmakers as this situation progresses. To my far right is Lieutenant Colonel Charles Schretzman. He allows me to call him Chuck. He is a graduate of West Point and has his master's degree from Long Island University. Did I pronounce that correctly? The lieutenant colonel and the major beside him both have served on active duty both in Iraq and Afghanistan. The lieutenant colonel is currently in charge of the ROTC unit at the University of Dayton. And among the more interesting things he's done in Southwest Asia is to partner with the Canadians in their expeditionary force. So he may have a few comments for us about how Afghanistan will change NATO as well. To his left is Benjamin Ohlander, U.S. Army Major Reserve. Did I get that right, Ben? Yep. Who is an undergraduate of Wright State University, and I'm already campaigning with him on his master's. Ben, likewise, served in Iraq and has served most recently in Afghanistan as executive officer in the 16th Psychological Operations, and played a part in the production of the 60-day review requested by General McChrystal, which will be driving the unfolding operation as we will be watching it. Ben will be talking about both General McChrystal's design. He has also written about the economic underpinnings of success as we might understand it in Afghanistan. And I'm especially happy to introduce, promoted as of today, Associate Professor Pramod Kantha. Dr. Kantha did his undergraduate work in Kathmandu, Nepal, his home, although I do understand in the past year he has taken his oath of U.S. citizenship. He did his MA at Ohio University and received his PhD in political science from the University of Missouri at Columbia. Pramod has written widely about democratization. He teaches politics of developing nations and politics of South Asia for us at Wright State University. He has been studying the integration of the Maoist insurgents into the new government in Nepal. It'll be interesting to see if he has some comments about the integration of the Taliban into the future state of Afghanistan. I thank you all in advance for your time. I'd like to begin with Lieutenant Colonel Schretzman with the question, sir, having been in both Iraq and Afghanistan, what can U.S. troops on the ground be expecting? And what should the American public be looking for? Obviously, our most recent experience has been with the operation in Iraq. How does it differ? What will Americans and our NATO partners be asked to do on the ground in Afghanistan? And this is a man who's just commissioned or is about to commission some new second lieutenants who may actually be helping carry out what we'll be discussing here today. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you. First of all, it's an honor to be here tonight to talk to everybody about what we typically do on what we've been doing for the last almost 10 years. Interestingly enough, I've been to Afghanistan. When I first deployed to Afghanistan, this was actually went into Oman, and this was October 3rd, 2001. So you think about that, that's a pretty long time ago. So we went in October 3rd, 2001 to Oman to basically stage an operation where we would deploy into Afghanistan. We went into Afghanistan on October 19th, where 199 Rangers jumped into the Helmand province to Objective Rhino to basically, and we did some maneuvers from that point. So it's been a while. We spent about 3 months there, and then following forces followed us into Afghanistan. So we've been to Afghanistan a long time. Got a chance also to go to Iraq in 03, 04, which was a difficult time when the insurgency really picked up. Was crossed the border. I'll step back. First crossed the border with the Rangers right in March. Spent about 3 months in Iraq. PCS, which changes station to Fort Drum, New York. It's about 25 miles south of Canada, very cold up there, but didn't spend too much time there and went back to Iraq for about 13 months. That was 03, 04, very difficult time for U.S. forces in Iraq. The insurgency was picking up. IEDs became prevalent. I was there when we had no armor on our vehicles. We were running around truthfully with flak vests on, but that was really the support. And we eventually got up to where we're at. By the time I was there, we had level 3 armor, went through all that process. So saw really Iraq, left Iraq going. I didn't really see the ultimately how we got to the point where we're at right now, which is actually, I think, a very good point. But didn't really left there, kind of not saying disgruntled, but really just going disillusioned about success. And then what I got a chance to actually go up to Canada and actually be an exchange officer. The U.S. has a bunch of exchanges with Great Britain, a bunch of different countries. Great Britain is a main player, Australia, and Canada. And got actually a chance to sit with the Canadian Expeditionary Forces Command when they deployed into Kandahar. They deployed with a brigade-size element and a battalion-size element and got a chance to go over and be a part of, we call it in Army terms now, effects-based operations. What effect are we having on the ground? And what we tried to look at and focusing on Afghanistan, this is the key so everybody knows what's going on, is it's not just about fighting a war. It's about what we call counterinsurgency is social work while being shot at. Again, counterinsurgency is social work while being shot at. So here we are, and I'll go even the time in Iraq where we're looking at security ultimately. You're trying to get at security, but you're also trying to get at development, and you're trying to get at governance. And those three lines of operation, we focused. When I was in Canada, I was effects-based. Each week I had to brief the three-star general on what was going on in Kandahar, and it was very difficult to get at those three lines of operation: security, governance, and development in Kandahar, with very difficult prospects on what's going on in Afghanistan. To compare Iraq and Afghanistan, two dynamically, and I know the other individuals on the board will talk about it, very different infrastructure, different terrain, of course, different tribal affiliations, different people, different religions, and ultimately we made, and I'll focus a little bit on Iraq here and I'll transition to Afghanistan, made a lot of mistakes in Iraq in the beginning, not understanding, truthfully, not saying the difference between Sunni and Shia. You can understand the difference by how you can look it up and say this is the difference between one, but really understanding that cultural, I don't want to use hatred, and I'm an infantry guy, so everything I say I'll sometimes come off a little bit in layman's terms, but it was, again, I'm in a Shia area as an infantryman. We're an infantry battalion, tremendous support. Move up to a Sunni area, nothing. Nobody's helping U.S. forces. Nobody's helping, and we're here to try to build hospitals. We're here to try to build city councils. We're here to try to provide security. And ultimately, and Ben's going to get into it, he was kind of there when this all happened, but there was a transition. So we made a lot of mistakes, not understanding the culture. And again, we take that Western mindset that, hey, let's do it our way. We know the best way. Well, I always see we always said Afghan face, Afghan pace. The pace of what's going to happen on the ground is really ultimately the result of what the Afghans or what the Iraqis are going to be able to do. So saw a lot of different things. Just want to talk. I went on there's a great website, the ISAF. ISAF is the International Security Assistance Force. That is General McChrystal is the general. He's in charge of ISAF. And ISAF is all the NATO forces on the ground in Afghanistan. International Security Assistance Force.
Chuck, I'm bringing up the homepage.
Okay. There's a great video on there, and he talks about, and he's with the ambassador, and he talks about what's going on in Marja, which will give you a really detailed approach of what's going on. And what they're actually trying to do there, and took some of it, the snippets from, is they're trying to protect the population. They're trying to make sure we have freedom of movement. That's the difficult. The transition from Iraq, a lot of IEDs. IEDs became very prevalent. And in the beginning of Afghanistan, there was no IEDs. Now the IEDs have transitioned where that's the difficult piece. It's not necessarily sometimes a force on force. It's more of the IEDs, the improvised explosive device that are causing a lot of the casualties. So it's protecting the population. This is what the forces are doing on the ground. And establishing freedom of movement and allowing governance. Because in a lot of the areas in Helmand, and I'll use that as an example, I was there with the Canadians in 2006. Remember, I was in Afghanistan in 2001. We had never gone really into Helmand province and Kandahar province till 2006. Because Afghanistan was an economy of force, because Iraq took all the resources, just focusing on the United States, took all the resources from the United States and focused on Iraq, and you had one brigade combat team. That's about, and with all the other support elements, about 20,000 troops along Regional Command East, which is along the Pakistan-Afghan border. So that was the difficulty. So now everybody's like, well, what's going on? Why are we in Marja? Why is all this fighting going on? Well, there's places that the Taliban have owned since 2001 where they were actually, and in the video they'll talk about they were flying the flag, the Taliban flag, and we just went in there. So the concept of what we're trying to do is we're trying to clear those areas. We're trying to hold. Ultimately, the key issue is hold those areas to build and to transfer, and that takes troops. And that takes troops from NATO troops, that takes U.S. troops. So that's why you've seen a surge. Again, clear, hold, build, and transfer. And all that's going on, you're building up the Afghan National Security Forces and the Afghan National Army, which is dynamically different than what has taken place in Iraq, and the fact that you had a very professional army in Iraq that dissolved kind of it, but they brought it back up, and that's what you see. The Iraqi army and Iraqi police are doing a great job compared to, if you want to compare it to where we're at in Afghanistan. And it's a more difficult puzzle there. The part of this also, what you see, these operations are going on right now. It's a demonstration to the Afghan people of our resolve, of NATO's resolve, of ISAF's resolve, of the United States resolve, and also show the international community that we have resolve in Afghanistan. And ultimately also, it's to show the enemy that we're not going anywhere. So I wanted to bring up those points. I know that as we get security, the lines of operation we talk, the key to success, and if I don't want to coin that we're nation building and all this, but that's what we've been doing. That's what we have, and we've talked about this before. We have units still in Korea, right? Since the early 50s, since the Korean War, we may have troops. And this, again, I'm Lieutenant Colonel, and I hope nobody quotes me. But I mean, we could have troops in Afghanistan for a very, very long time. But I'll hold questions to when we do the question and answers. Again, it's great to be here, and it's great to see everybody's happy face.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Schretzman. Ben, Major Ohlander, if you would pick up at that point, how will we know if General McChrystal's program is working? And could you talk to us a bit about how you participated in the 60-day review?
I was there during a real interesting time. I first arrived in country just as they were starting to ramp back up. And as the Colonel has said, when I first got there, there was one brigade combat team on the ground. And the force density is so small that all you can do is play whack-a-mole. Your sole purpose is to simply disrupt insurgent operations and then move on to the next thing. So over the 15 months that I was there, watched this grow from one brigade to almost 2 full divisions, to what we have on the ground now. And the massive growing pains that went with that, along with the fact that when you're just chasing insurgents around, you don't have a plan. You're throwing money at individual problems, you're buying off individual leaders, but it's all about keeping the lid on until you can change the force density. So a lot of the planning that took place when General McChrystal came in, he initiated what was called the 60-day strategic assessment, which is to go back and say, what is it going to take to win? We have 3 lines of operation. Essentially, it's combat, it's development, it's governance. So what is the minimum amount of infrastructure, and what is the minimum level of competency for the Afghan government so that we can begin, and victory has been defined as the ability to pull our forces out and bring them home. That essentially is the metric for victory, is when the Afghans can take over. So the 60-day assessment, I had an interesting position. I was sent over as the staff planner for PSYOP, Psychological Operations, and I supported the 101st Airborne in Regional Command East, which would be if you took a pie slice, it'd be between about 12 and 3 o'clock on the map. And then I was then later sent down to the ISAF headquarters to help do psychological operations planning down there as well. So I sat on the Strategic Planning Committee, the Intel Committee, and the Information Operations Committee when they did the 60-day assessment. And the fact of the matter is that this didn't start with General McChrystal's arrival. Most of the staff planning for this had begun 6 months before under General McKiernan. And then when General McChrystal came in and started the review, in many cases, when his people started to flow in from CENTCOM, they said, yep, we're going to do it. So when they started the operations last summer in Helmand. That had actually begun planning under General McKiernan and had already been executed under his watch. And in many cases, what General McChrystal has done is not necessarily changed the strategic direction. What he's done is he's put some teeth into implementing pieces of it that simply weren't as well supported as they were before. So when we start talking about what it's going to take to come out, the things to pay attention to very, very closely is what happens in Helmand province over the next 2 years. We have stacked the deck to say, okay, if we can do Helmand, we can do this country. If we cannot do Helmand, we can't. And the three components that are in place is Helmand has a particularly good governor. His name is Governor Mangal. Karzai really doesn't like him. The Mangal is pretty clean as Afghans go. He runs a meritocracy, and he is focused on bringing his province into the part where he takes the governance and development part seriously. So what we've done, particularly with the debacle of the election last summer, is we've now put all of our blue chips behind Governor Mangal. So that's the first component. If Mangal lives for 2 years, then doesn't get assassinated. And if he's able to deliver the governance, he's going to deliver the governance part in Helmand province. Or it's not going to happen. The second component is that the force density was they put about 10,000 Marines into Helmand. And the intent behind that was to put enough force density on the ground to physically control the space. And this goes all the way back to T.E. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom. This is how you win a counterinsurgency. You get enough troops on the ground, there's no place for the insurgent to hide, and when the insurgent can't hide, they can't operate. If we sustain that force density, then that will keep the insurgents pushed out, which will allow the government the opportunity to build the governance. And then so with those two components in place, then with the right governance and the security provided, then it's whether or not we can build the infrastructure of the Afghan army and the Afghan police to the point where they can take over the physical security and maintain the development of the governance. So those are our 3 lines of operation: governance, development, security, and this is how we're going to do it in Helmand. Where the numbers came from for the surge, the 30,000. To do a brigade combat team correctly, you need about 10,000 people. Once you've identified a number of pockets that absolutely have to be controlled by the insurgency, in this case Helmand is a primary source of recruiting, it's the primary source of money, and it's one of the primary sanctuary areas for the leadership. It's key terrain for the enemy. If you have 10,000 troops, you can do one of those pieces of key terrain at a time. If you have 20,000, you can do 2 of them. If you have 30,000, you can do 3 by putting in those big brigades. So first 10,000 went in. They went into the Green River, the green zone along the Helmand River. That was the first 10,000. Second 10,000 went in. They went in. They're going into Marjan now. Third 10,000 are going to go into Kandahar this summer. That's the 30,000. So that's exact. So it wasn't something we just picked out of our heads to say why we needed between 20 and 40,000 troops. It was how many of these key areas can we control at the same time and work on this 2-year timetable. So if we haven't gotten it done in 2 years, and if Helmand isn't fixed in 2 years, then that's probably when we're going to start pulling the plug.
Okay. The question then to Dr. Kantha is, can or perhaps will Pakistan be able to cooperate with this mission? in terms of Al-Qaeda and Taliban either fleeing toward Pakistan or already there. That's the other piece of this pincer operation, the critical piece. Dr. Kantha has worked in Pakistan, obviously teaches South Asian politics, and teaches a seminar which he'll be offering this summer on U.S., India, Pakistan, Afghani foreign relations, just in case you feel you need more after today. Pramod, what do you think? Are they capable of that part of the mission?
Thank you for such an intelligent question. And I was thinking there is this cliche saying it's $1 million question. But these days we don't talk in terms of millions, particularly when we are talking of South Asia. So this is a $1 trillion question, okay? And I don't know definitive answer, but we can shoot for tentative answer. And the tentative answer to this question is maybe. Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Right, surprisingly. And I'm assuming that most of you know the Pakistan connection here and what is going on in Afghanistan, and in terms of particularly Taliban's. Pakistan has been very supportive of Taliban in the past. In a way, Pakistan has been the breeding ground for Talibans of all different varieties that we can talk of, and also protector. Part of the reason for Pakistan to have taken this Taliban course so heavily is, of course, their plan to acquire strategic depth against India. So when we are talking of Pakistan, when we are talking of Taliban, you cannot leave India out because it is essential part of the puzzle there. And Taliban's, in that sense, even going back a little bit to the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, and then the fight against the Soviet Union, and then this collaboration between the Afghan Taliban and then the jihadi forces that entered that fight, and then the jihadi forces also taking the fight over later to Kashmir. So when you see all those connections, what you figure out is this issue is so central to the strategic perception of Pakistan in terms of what position they want to take with regard to Kashmir, what position they want to take in terms of how governance that two of our former panelists have talked about develops in Afghanistan. And there is not always what you can say very good compatibility between different objectives here. For Pakistan, when we are talking, or NATO is talking about building a strong government in Afghanistan, that's not something Pakistan wants, okay? Because Pakistan always wants a sort of a client state in Afghanistan. If you don't know, Durand Line, which is border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, has still not been recognized finally, or with finality, we should say, by Afghanistan. They don't want that issue to arise because they have the same population on both sides of the borders, the Pashtuns. Another issue is that Pakistanis are very concerned that Indians are staging a lot of activities in Afghanistan right now. Under ISAF and NATO kind of command, the Indians are doing a lot of road building. They are extending a lot of their other activities. They are also helping with the governance in certain aspects. And if you have heard, you must have, I'm assuming, several times Indian embassy, Indian personnel have been attacked in Afghanistan. And in the embassy attack, Indian embassy attack, even the CIA and other intelligence agencies had indicated that they had definitive evidence that the attack was linked to Pakistan's ISI. So what we are seeing here is that all these central pieces or actors who are there, they all have very divergent objectives in terms of what happens in Afghanistan, what happens in Pakistan, what happens in the region. Therefore, what we can do is only give contingent answer to what is going to happen. But having said that, having laid out this framework, I'm going to kind of be with our two earlier panelists and be a little more optimistic about it. So there are certain things that are reflective of certain degree of optimism. What are those? As you said, we have seen the evidence that Pakistan has been increasingly active in arresting many of these Afghan, what you can say, Taliban leaders, as well as, of course, recently, just yesterday was it, or day before, they arrested one of the Al-Qaeda leaders who is from the United States. Then Pakistan, over the years, over the past several months, has conducted military operations in SWAT. SWAT has kind of become a model for the policies that our two panelists were talking about, that combat, clear, hold, and develop. And when General Petraeus was there, they were talking in Pakistani media that no foreign dignitary these days comes to Pakistan who returns or leaves Pakistan without visiting SWAT, because that has become a model for fighting insurgency. So SWAT operation, then South Waziristan operation, then arrests of all these different people, Pakistan's sort of complicity with drone attacks. Yep. So all those kind of signals do indicate that Pakistan has shown a lot more cooperation with the United States. Also, Baradar arrest, who is a senior leader, actually, they are saying almost second in command in terms of Afghan Talibans. And the CIA and ISI, they say there are confusing signals, but they're saying that it was a joint operation. So there are signals. Now, why is it happening? That's the major question. Why are the Pakistanis becoming more cooperative? And then the question is it that they have made a strategic shift in their strategic perception regarding what is going on? Have they really decided to crack down against all Talibans, regardless of whether they belong to Quetta Shura or they are Pakistani Talibans? Of course, they have launched very effective offensive against Pakistani Talibans. But as far as the Quetta Shura, as far as Haqqani group is concerned, the signals are still mixed. Today, the latest from the White House is that they don't know for sure if there has been a strategic shift on the Pakistani side, or particularly intelligence side. But there are all these signals. You can say that positive developments are there. Part of the reason is that Pakistan, who was that? Yesterday I was watching Fareed Zakaria, and General Petraeus was there. And one of the things he said, which I like very much, fits in the sequence of events, was that it is now realized by Pakistani army as well as politicians that this is not America's war. This is not NATO's war. This is also Pakistan's war. I think that is the central key difference that has happened over the past year, that the Pakistanis have realized that this is their fight. They cannot just use these militants and terrorists against India and then rest easy. It's going to come back to you. It's going to haunt you. So in that sense, there is also a shift in Pakistan in terms of public opinion. Public opinion is, because people are getting hit every day. Lahore has become a battlefield. They have attacked the security forces. They have attacked Rawalpindi. They have attacked military installations. They have attacked Peshawar. So they are increasingly getting they are infecting Karachi, So the point is that it is becoming a big, huge governance issue for Pakistan, and public opinion is turning against it because Pakistan is not able to do the basic that a government is supposed to do, which is to protect its own population. So in that sense, that's a positive development. Another positive development that I see, which goes in line with General McChrystal's strategy in Afghanistan, which is to pay attention to governance. Governance has, and in that sense, we can't leave the United States also out of this picture. And what I mean is that when the United States talks about governance these days in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, it is not something that has been part of United States foreign policy in the past. So I was reading a book about India, and they were talking about Indian democracy, and they talked about the entire history of India, and then they are saying, okay, in 1947 India became democratic, but that was something that was kind of crafted by the British. But then India started a course or journey that is a struggle against itself, because India was never democratic, if you look at the entire history. Similarly, when the United States talks about foreign policy and governance and providing governance and security to the people, this is new to the US foreign policy. And in that sense, US is also struggling against its own past, against its own policies. Because in the past, if you look at the US relationship with Pakistan, governance never figured out. It was all security relationship. During entire Cold War, if you look at our relationship all around the world, what happens to the people? People factor was missing always from US foreign policy. It was all strategic ties, ties with the military particularly. So in that sense, it is a new route that the United States is following. Of course, it has done some of that in Iraq. How far that will go in the success way in Afghanistan remains to be seen. As far as Pakistan is concerned, what we are trying to achieve in Afghanistan, Pakistan already has. So if you are talking about just building a state institution or a state building, I know you have talked about nation building too, but if you are talking about only a state building, setting up Afghan National Army, then setting up a big, what you can say, forceful Afghan police, is that going to do the job? If that were the case, Pakistan will be very well governed. Because Pakistan has a huge military, Pakistan has a huge police force, still it is one of the least governed and least effective governance structure in the world. So there is a lesson there that only having a strong state is not going to do it. Is the state caring? Is the state accountable? Is the state people-oriented? And as long as we do not figure that out, we are going to have a million insurgencies around the world. Okay? And the point there that I'm making is that in Pakistan, things are going positive. For the first time in Pakistan, what you have is you have a democratic government. The United States is supporting that democratic government. If the United States was not supporting that, probably after, what was that, Kerry Lugar aid package, the military is pretty angry that they have to be now accountable to where the money goes. They don't want to do that. Recently, Hillary Clinton made a statement that better off Pakistanis have to pay more tax. It's not only we who should be pitching money, but you also pay tax. Of course, they are sheltered. Pakistani military officials don't want to pay tax. They have the huge stake in Pakistani economy. Agricultural sector in Pakistan dominated by the feudal forces. They don't want to pay any tax on agriculture. So there are a lot of interests there who want a state to remain weak. Or hostage. But democracy is a positive element that has developed in Pakistan. It's still in a very infant stage. But it's a positive development. Nawaz Sharif and PPP, they are talking to each other. They are trying to rescue each other in some situations. In some situations, they are also trying to dump each other. So, but that is part of democratic politics. Judiciary has come a long way. Actually, the rise of judiciary in Pakistan has been most phenomenal if you look at it from democratic point of view. So I'll kind of end there, but one more remark on Maoist integration in Nepal that you said. If you look at Maoist integration in Nepal, they had about, 25,000 combatants that were there. Now, how did that process start? The process started from grassroots, not from the top. because the king had no incentive to integrate the Maoists, because as long as the Maoists were there, the king could ask external assistance, everybody else, look, my house is on fire, I need more money. So he had no incentive to do that. Who did it? The democratic forces in Nepal agreed that as long as the Maoists are there, the king will use Maoists against us. So why don't we enter into an agreement with the Maoists? And they did that with the assistance of India and also other countries, because they were also kind of tired of the king. Lesson there is that if you have pluralism, if you have democratic forces, even we don't have a constitution, but we have democratic forces who compete with each other, arm wrestle with each other, fight with each other. That gives certain degree of stability to the process that, unlike the military in Pakistan who can threaten that, hey, if you guys are creating too much disorder, we are going to take over. That force is not there in Nepal to take over. And the military has also been kind of balanced in the sense that all these different political forces pull military in different directions. So they can't take the risk of staging a coup. Besides, Nepal does not have a history of military coup. So there are important lessons to be learned.
Nor does it have a monarchy any longer. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kantha. Part of the program I know that I hope that you've been interested in is the questions to our panelists. I'd invite you to raise your hand. I'll call upon you if you don't mind introducing yourself very briefly and then directing your question to any member of the panel. Yes, sir, please.
Hi, my name is Rajesh Radwan. I'm a U.S.-born citizen. I currently work here for Booz Allen Hamilton in support of work at the base. My question is, I guess, primarily to Dr. Kantha because of his expertise, but I'd be interested in hearing from any of the panelists on this. Clearly, Pakistan is a key player in the Afghan theater. And but Pakistan's main foreign policy interest appears to be the relationship or their struggle with India over Kashmir. And to extend that a little bit further, India is actually, I think, getting tired of the Kashmir problem, although I'm an American more than an Indian in terms of my background. And I think India would rather be focusing on China, from what I hear from my relatives in India, and not have to worry too much about this Kashmir issue. What I'm wondering is, can the U.S. leverage India's interests in the rest of the region to maybe convince India to make a deal with Pakistan over Kashmir with the quid pro quo that if India makes us a decent deal, then Pakistan will crack down on the Afghan Taliban and Al-Qaeda?
There is, the way the U.S. forces and U.S. foreign policy is structured, Central Command includes Pakistan, Afghanistan, the stands, and moves westward from there. India falls into PACOM or Pacific Command, and that is done deliberately to de-link India versus Pakistani quid pro quo. So they're in separate regional commands for exactly that reason. So General Petraeus' mandate includes supporting operations in Pakistan, but because the issue of Pakistani and Indian relations is so sensitive, India is not General Petraeus' turf, and we go out of our way not to link quid pro quos between India and Pakistan. This is an Indian and Pakistani issue they have to resolve by themselves. Our focus is on the Pakistan-Afghan problem.
But in the real world, I know Dr. Kantha will have a footnote here that he'd like to add. Yes.
No, go ahead.
Pramod?
Okay. Well, I agree with Ben. India, one of the greatest achievements that Indian statesmen and diplomats are very proud of is that with the new relationship with the United States, they have been able to dehyphenate themselves from Pakistan. Because earlier, every day or every time you talk about India, you talk about Pakistan. During Bush administration with nuclear accord and all that, that has changed. India has been recognized as a strategic partner of the United States, very good economic relationship, nuclear issue. So India feels proud that it has been dehyphenated from Pakistan. Now, this issue is so sensitive that Holbrooke, initially the mission was kind of, this was the talk, that maybe we should also link India to it. But once they learned of the reaction, they said, no, don't do this, because you cannot do that. So India will be very, very, what you can say, outraged if it is linked with this Pakistan issue, because India considers it has a much better record, responsible nuclear power, not a source of terrorism. Why would you equate India and Pakistan? So that's a very big issue there.
But that does not mean we will not have a panel on it, focusing on it someday. We've done many panels from the Middle East throughout South Asia. Of course, the Armenian Declaration this past week from the House reminds us of how many issues there are in this region. But do we have another question to our panelist? Bashir?
I don't know how many of you are aware of Newsweek, dated February the 15th. Anybody seen that? Okay. Here's a major article. It says, Kashmir is the key to peace in Afghanistan. If you haven't read it, any of those panelists over here, I really suggest that you do.
Who's the author?
Author is Jonathan Chipperman.
Okay.
All right, that's number one. Number two, I happen to have been born in Kashmir, very much in the center of the situation between Kashmir, India, and Pakistan. It's a myth that as much as India does not want to get Kashmir connected with the international situation, which it is, it's on the UN agenda. UN is on both sides of Kashmir, and the Indian control and the Pakistani control. It is being discussed all over the world, and the European Parliament has a special individual for Kashmir conflict. The Britain, their parliament has a special issue, so you can't de-link the thing. What is interesting about this article is that as much as India does not want to get Holbrooke involved, that they are talking in their own way, and the United States is very interested in India and Pakistan trying to resolve this Kashmir conflict.
Dr. Carnes is one of our resident Chinese experts. Do you have any reaction to that? I know China also has some interest in this territory.
China does, but not specifically in this dispute. It has a piece of the, it has border disputes with India and border disputes with Afghanistan. But in terms of the piece, I mean, Bashir, I have not seen that piece, but you know, it is one of the interesting things. I did not realize that the commands were different. As Ben just mentioned, that India fell under the PAC command versus the Middle Eastern command. I had seen the material on the Indian objection to being linked to Holbrooke's assignment. And one of the interesting things I think about this, and Donna, you and I were talking about this with Colonel Schretzman on Monday, is that when Holbrooke came here to Dayton for the Bosnian negotiations, everybody knew that Kosovo was a problem, but everybody also knew it was going to be all they could do to get a solution to the Bosnian war without dealing with Kosovo. And Holbrooke says this very clearly in his memoir, that they knew it would have been better, all things considered, in an ideal world, if they could have dealt with the Kosovo situation in 1995 in the negotiations at the same time with Bosnia, rather than letting it continue to simmer and then burst into the open in 1999 as it did. But it was one of those choices about how you go about dealing with problems, either because you have enough to do on your plate or because some major player refuses to let you put it on the plate, and you have to find another way to open the diplomatic doors to deal with it at some other point. And it seems to me that the Kashmir issue is probably this kind of an issue, in which there's going to have to be another route, whether it's India and Pakistan alone, or whether ultimately the two of them can agree to allow any kind of international third-party mediation, which they've always refused to do. Who knows? But in terms of dealing with the Afghanistan-Pakistan equation, it seems pretty clear that they want to keep it out of that equation. Even though there is an inevitable linkage, just as there was with Kosovo with Bosnia.
If I may just
Please.
add one point here, and picking up on your point too, that there might be a better time or another time to do that. But one of the routes that could be that would somehow make the two parties come closer in terms of finding a settlement on Kashmir issue may come out of stabilizing democracy in Pakistan. Because each time you have a democratic government in Pakistan, they seem to be exploring if there is certain common ground that we can reach at. As far as India is concerned, if Pakistan agrees to have the settlement along the existing line of control, then I have seen indications that India might be interested to go along with that, which is something that in Pakistan would not be that acceptable politically. But politically, how do you pave the ground unless you have politics? In Pakistan, there is no politics. It's a new phenomenon that politics is coming to the forefront in Pakistan. So if they stabilize political process where more debates can happen, where more churning of ideas can happen, then maybe there would be greater room to deal with this issue. But not with the military, because for military it is a sacred cow. Anytime you have problem, anytime somebody is trying to do something to the military, civilians are trying to assert against the military, you can always raise the Indian Baghi, anti-Indian slogans and Kashmir issue and this and that, and get all the leverage.
Peg.
Can I direct a different question to Ben? And that has to do with McChrystal's request for 40,000 troops. You laid out what we do with 30, which was what the president ultimately decided on. And one could speculate, was this a case of being in the South Asian bazaar, that you put out a bid for 40,000 recognizing you're going to settle for 30 in the bargaining world? Or was this a case that there really was something that they wanted to do with that additional 10,000? That they're not going to be able to do now, or are we going to be able to pull enough? Are we going to get enough from the NATO allies to do what we wanted to do with an additional 10,000 American troops, or what he wanted to do?
There are essentially two forces that are operating in Afghanistan right now on the U.S. side. You have the Division Size Command that is in RC East, that is largely charged with the defense of the capital. Regional Command East completely surrounds the capital, and that occupies the talents of two brigades. When I was there, it was the 3rd Brigade of the 10th Mountain, and then 4th Brigade of the 82nd. And they basically control the approaches to Kabul from the north and the south. And then you have two other brigades that are largely along the Pakistani border and operate up in those areas there, whose job is to interdict the insurgents who are affiliated with the Peshawar Shura, who come across the frontier. So that's, and those forces are decisively engaged. They have a full-time job. So if you need to go and expand your operations into the southern part of Afghanistan, you have to go back to the well and get additional forces to do that. So what you have is you have a situation where we have identified a number of pockets where this is controlled by, if we take this away, we can deprive the insurgency of its command, its money, and its people. And if you look at it and say, well, it's going to take us 2 years to complete this operation, and we identify 12 of these areas, then 2 years times 40,000 troops is 3 cycles, 6 years. If we're only going to have 30,000 troops, then that kicks to the right. If we're only going to get 20,000 troops, that kicks further to the right. So what they did, and this is my guess, is the reason it took, I don't know this for a fact, but what I think happened was they got the 60-day assessment, which, remember, there'd been a year's worth of planning that had gone into this. So the 60-day assessment was really a lot more than 60 days. They got the bill for it, and then they went and said, well, this is going to cost a lot of money. How do we do this? And I think eventually what happened was they split the difference at the political level. They asked for 40, 20 seemed too small. Let's go 30 in the middle and try to see if you guys can't figure out how to get this done more quickly. The problem is that each time we do one of these operations, these great big operations, it takes as long as it takes. And you've got to let, as the Colonel pointed out, you're on Afghan time now. And however long it takes for them to get their act together is how long it's going to take. And it may, we're saying 2 years. It may not be 2 years. It may be as long as the Afghans decide.
Thank you. Ma'am, in the red, and then in front, and then in the green. Thank you. Please introduce yourself and rise.
Hi, I'm Valerie, and I guess I have a couple of questions for the forces on the ground. I want you to talk to me a little bit about the contract military, that this seems to be the first war where we've had such a heavy dependence on black water, which now is weed or something like that, I don't know. And I'm wondering, given all the negative publicity that seems to be surrounding these contract forces, is there any possibility that we actually will have a split with it and let the military stand on its own? I'm guessing that that's probably not in the cards at this point in time. And also, you made a comment about it's a 2-year cycle to see whether or not this is really going to work. Well, that will actually kick us into a political cycle as well, because that's right into a political campaign. And whether or not you see that that's going to have an effect as to whether or not we're really going to stay, no matter what the situation is at that point in time, or if we're going to get caught up in some political process. I'm really concerned about the end game of this.
So if you want to field the black
Okay. On the, I guess on the contracting side, I saw more of a contracting issue in, let's say, in Iraq. A lot of times you would not know where contractors were. At times they're usually security forces that are maybe taking care of a security detail for a dignitary, or moving, for instance, moving logistical supplies or something like that, where they have gotten in trouble, let's say, by insurgency, been attacked by insurgency, and had to react to the situation. I'm not sure the numbers that are, let's say, are on the ground in Afghanistan and Iraq. Sometimes it's a problem because in an area of operation that you're given, there's so many moving pieces of being at contractors, being at international forces, we have sometimes a difficult time and sitting on the special operations side of the house, where we have conventional forces. Let's say the 82nd Airborne Division is a conventional force, and you have an interaction with your special operations forces that do for instance, they're looking for a bad guy. They think this guy's in this house here. They go and do something in the area that you actually, I'm the 82nd guy sitting there going, why'd you that was our informant. So you have some multiple, when you get together a group like that, you have sometimes some difficulties. But the contracting side, I think in certain situations, they've done some things that have been wrong ultimately. Soldiers have made mistakes that have done things wrong, and it's wrong because of either poor leadership, etc. I was there during the Abu Ghraib piece. That was a failure of leadership. That was a failure of the leadership of that organization, of that prison, a failure to, if there was something wrong, to fix it. Ultimately relieve the people that were in charge, and ultimately, so I think in the Blackwater cases, you see them rise up, a few of them, that something has gone awry, but in most cases, I think you're going to see contractors on the battlefield for a long period of time filling roles, so it doesn't take away from the combat forces, the limited combat forces that we actually have.
On the political side, I couldn't even begin to speculate. Remember, our national objective for being in Afghanistan is not because we like the Afghans. There's nothing to do with it. What it has to do is to deprive international terrorism in the form of al-Qaeda from a staging base from which they can launch operations against the West. That's why we're there. And we're accomplishing that mission, and we're successful at that mission today, though you can argue it's at an extreme cost in blood and treasure. But as of right now, Afghanistan is not being used as a base to launch operations against the West. In the long run, it's cost-effective, more cost-effective for us to have the Afghans do this for us than for us to stay there, which means we've got to build up security, developments, and governance so they can assume this job on their own. My personal sense is that if the Marjan operation is successful, if the Helmand River operation is successful, if the Kandahar operation is showing progress this summer, then we're going to drive against specific benchmarks and specific metrics, and you make the case that says this thing's moving in the right direction, then it'll continue. If the assessment is that, you know, Mangal's one guy and he can't move the entire Afghan government, the government in Kabul, we've determined, is fatally corrupt. So if your whole point is to sell Afghan governance, how do you do that when the uppermost echelons are simply, you know, ineffective at what they're trying to do? Now you're talking about some political dynamics that mean that maybe we're looking at whatever Plan B is in a couple of years, or, you know, as we head into the election cycle. I just don't know.
Mine has some similar, I'm Alan, by the way. Similar is that since Afghan society has never had a central government, as individual tribes that run each area of the country, how are we going to unite that to be able to do what we want to protect us over here on this side? Because we see that sometimes one tribe will be protecting one thing and one tribe will be protecting another, and they might be 10 miles apart from each other.
Does anyone care to volunteer to answer that question?
That was a tough one.
That's a real tough one.
But you're correct. The great book is Make My Cadets Read, and they're actually briefing me tomorrow on a basic case study on they're deploying the KAUST, and they do a mission analysis on what all they need to know on the ground before they go in there. As an example, what tribes are on the ground, what the people are, what the terrain is, etc. But it's really difficult. Afghanistan has not ever been ruled by Kabul in its entire history. And your governance is the key. The governance is the key is the fact that, you know, you go to Kandahar, people don't trust the national government from Kabul at all, ever have trusted for how many thousands of years that tradition has gone on. And here we are as an example of the Helmand, that we can call it the Helmand Project, and hopefully that works. But that's just one of 38 provinces. And we think we have 50 different states in the United States. You got 38 different provinces that are looking at, you know, a different life in a different way. So it's definitely going to be challenging. I think the governance piece is the key. A lot of it is done on, and I hope the Helmand governor nothing happens to him. But I know the Kandahar governor that the focus was, he was a one-man show working on his cell phone, and the bureaucracy there is a tendency to be, of course, corrupt, and it's really not there. So that trust of that government, that I know sometimes we don't necessarily trust our own government, but the trust there it's going to take a long time. It's going to take
the thing that's different about Afghanistan is when we talk about the insurgency, there is no insurgency there. There is no single insurgency there. In the eastern region, there were probably 50 different groups that had 50 different agendas, that wanted 50 different things, that none of them agreed on anything except they didn't like the central government. They didn't like each other either. So it was. There really wasn't anybody, if you wanted to go and talk to somebody, there really wasn't anybody you could go and talk to who controlled a big enough set to actually cut a deal with. In the South's a little different. You got the Popalzai Pashtuns that are down there, and they're predominant through the Kandahar, Helmand, Nangarhar area, that whole area in the South. And if you could flip the Popalzais, and now Karzai's a Popalzai too, so that gives you an idea of just how complicated even that gets. But they're much, much more homogenous, and they're much, much more likely that if they can see if the Popalzais in Helmand province see life getting better, then the guys in Nangarhar and the guys in Kandahar might say, hey, I want some of that too. So it's trying to do a little bit of what we did in Iraq with the Sunni awakening. Largely because trying to win this thing in the eastern part, I don't know how you do that. It's just too complicated. It's exactly her point. It's just too complicated. The West and the North, It really varies. But if you can win the South, you can deprive the insurgency of its primary source of troops, money, and command. So you might be able, if you can win the South, then you won't finish the insurgency, but you may be able to knock a zero off the back end. And that might be as good as it gets.
Last question, ma'am, in the green. You've been patient. Please stand and introduce yourself.
I'm Manasi Kakre, and I'm more into international business, but politics comes with it, so I take it. But my question, and it might be naive because I'm new to this, but it seems to me, and I may be wrong, that people have to be ready in order to accept any change and to sustain that change. Now, any culture, especially the culture in that region, are those people ready to give them what we are trying to give, or to accept the goals that we are trying to set in front of them? Are those people ready, first of all? If they're ready, then, or if they can take it and they can attain it, can they sustain what we're trying to do culture-wise? For example, because different people have different cultures, they have different interests, not just in the countries, but in one country in different regions. Just as what we were talking about in those lines, can they sustain that development, or whatever we call it, the change?
I think from just the key, the proof's in the pudding kind of deal is what are we telling the people, and are we following through with the projects, with the development, with the keys, employment as an example? Are we providing alternate needs of, for Helmand Province, where majority of the poppies are for heroin, are we providing an alternative crop as an example? So it ultimately comes down, I think the people are not saying they're skeptical, but they're kind of a wait and see, and listening to what we're saying, being it ISAF forces and Allied forces and the Afghan government too, and are they following through? And that's the key: is are we able to follow through with those, or is the insurgency able to knock us and derail us and then they point to, hey, they're the ones in charge, not the Afghan National Army or the governance piece in Afghanistan. No, it's the insurgents are in charge, and they derail the system. Oh.
Well, when I about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, we were working through an NGO, and what we were doing is myself and a couple of other of the officers that were working with the SAP task force, is we were sitting in meetings with Talibs. And you want to talk about an emotionally intense experience, is taking off the body armor, taking off the helmet, taking the magazine out of your rifle, and sitting on a dirt floor with these guys with no security around. That was intense. And just talking to them. And basically what they said was, we are so tired of this. Life expectancy in Afghanistan, if you make it into your 40s, you've beat the clock. Guy I talked to looked like he was 70. He was 45. He was my age. Life expectancy for women, high 30s. Infant mortality, maternal mortality. They know life sucks. And the thing that came out of them was, we are so tired of this, but we have sat here for 10 years listening to you guys promise it's going to get better. We've sat here for 10 years listening to your puppet president, the SS Karzai, telling us it's going to get better, and it never gets any better. So, give us a sign. Show us something. Because what's happened is the costs of security blew the budget and largely derailed a lot of this that went on between 2003 and 2006. And then the surge in Iraq, they took more money out. So for about 3 years, all we were trying to do is keep the lid on. And that's what cost us a lot of the momentum and cost us a lot of the goodwill. So even when I was there, when I first got there, this was, for people who were in Iraq, where you saw all the money that was being thrown at the problems, and then you'd fly into these cheesy little dirt strips in Afghanistan that are only operational 10 days out of the year because of the mud and the rain and the rest of it. If that had been Iraq, that strip would have been paved, and there would have been stuff built, and there would have been a PX, and there would have been a place for you to call home, and a Burger King. Well,
No.
you get to Afghanistan, and you fly into this little dirt strip back of one of these little Blackwater C9s, and they give you the briefing that says, okay, if we lose a wheel again, just sit tight. It's going to come to a stop. And you're looking at it going, it's a joke, right? And he says, no, we lost a wheel. We lost a wheel in a pothole here about 3 months ago. So that's the difference. So when we start talking about all these things, the dollar amount to do this right at this point in time is probably breathtaking to really get in and do it right. So what's going to happen is we will pay what we can afford, we'll assess as we go, and what victory is going to wind up looking like is what is the bare minimum necessary for the Afghans to take over so we can start ramping down the costs and bringing people home. Because as a hemorrhage of blood and treasure, what we're doing now is we're spending just enough that we're kind of stuck there without really spending what it's going to take to bring us all out, the way we did in Iraq. I mean, we threw cash at the Iraq problem like nobody's business.
Well, our time is concluded. Would you please join me in thanking the panel? If you are not a member of the Dayton Council on World Affairs, I would urge you to join us. I would invite you to future programs. Thanks to the panel. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to Tom Pearson for the taping. And thanks to Sinclair for being our host. Good evening. Safe home, everyone.